I thought I heard.
Okay. Turn the hearing up to date. Okay. Consent agenda items. And all we had time to.
Our financial, am I missing something besides the check register for, this is out of which budget, which fund? This is like,
Those are just the checks. They could be out of different funds,
okay,
if I'm understanding the question correctly. We will have a document for you this evening, that's similar to what you were asking for, I think, that shows all the different funds. That's what you're asking for.
yeah, I mean,
Is there a specific item that you have a question about? I could probably tell you which fund it comes from.
no, I'm just looking at this and I know that this isn't all the expenditures of the school in a month. It doesn't even have salaries on it.
No, because
So
that's
I
run
know-
through a separate part of the software.
So that's where I'm going with
Okay.
this. I mean, it just,
Well,
so
that's all of the operating, what we call the operating costs. It would be everything but salaries, so. But the other one, it has that on there, so.
okay. I'm not trying to like make work or be difficult. I mean, I'm just, you know, if we're approving the financial statements.
Well, maybe I can answer your question a little bit. I think I know where you're coming from. The salaries have been approved, so it's just a matter of division of them over a 12-month period. We've already approved them for the year because we approved the negotiated agreement. So we don't need to approve salaries, paycheck. We're approving payments that are bills to the budgets. So it's not, we don't need to do it twice.
We're approving checks in this case for signature, but I guess part of what I perceive to be financial statements is the documentation of what exactly the status of our finances is each month, given the income and the expenditures that regularly occur. And that to me is what approving financial
That's what the
statements
other
is.
thing that has a percent on it will show us. Like instructional salaries, it'll show so much spent for the year. That answer? Does that make sense? Because those are,
It just doesn't have it broken out by individual, so.
that'd be a lot of line items, if you did every one of them. I know what you're saying, but it's just, it'd be a tremendous amount of work, but they're broken out and they're grouped. Instructional salary is actually several line items that's grouped into one, am I correct? Because it could be vocational instructional salaries, it could be, but a lot of them are grouped together.
I mean, one of the reasons we don't do that, I mean, the salaries themselves are public record, but some of the choices that individual staff choose to make with how they have deductions and things like that are not public record. And those would show up on those statements if we were to put those out. That's why we cluster them and put them on to just one category for instruction, administration, things like that. And when you see the sheet for tonight, the new format, we have the old format and the new one. Look at that and then talk about what additional information you feel like you might need. So.
Any other questions or that you have on the consent agenda items? Not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Moved and second to approve the consent agenda items. Any further discussion? All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign, 7-0. Patron comments. Is there any patrons that wish to speak? Hearing, we'll move on to the first item of business. Dr. Kimberly, the first item is calendar adoption.
I apologize again, Barb. Use the projector a great deal tonight. So. This is basically identical to what we sent out to you, to the board to review. The one change that has occurred in this since you saw it, and also it would be a change for staff. Staff had an opportunity to see it last week and comment on it, or to get in touch with me and comment on it. We sent out a copy to all of them. We moved student enrollment date. We had it on there originally as the 7th, and we have some staff that would prefer to have it a little bit later, so that it would kind of lengthen the summer a little bit, so they wouldn't have to be back so early. So we moved it from the 7th to the 14th. That still gives us about but a little over a week before kids come back. So otherwise, it looks exactly like the one that we sent out for you. I think the majority of staff are okay. They like this version, particularly better than the one that we looked at as a possibility of having the late starts. There were a couple staff that had interest in extending Christmas vacation through the 3rd and 4th and coming back on the 7th. That would mean we wouldn't have a teacher workday at the end of the semester, and it would stretch the calendar out on the other end, and would end up wrapping it around to the 21st, so it'd be an extra weekend there. So there were only a couple that had interest in that, so we did not pursue that.
Are you moving the graduation date up then a week because of no school?
We actually don't set graduation on this calendar. Mr. Bergen sets that, and I don't know if he's looked at that yet or not.
I don't have my contacts in, but it'd be the 18th.
We also
Be corresponding to this year.
yeah, we also look at when universities have them too, to try to avoid that. It's not always possible to avoid it, but we do try to do that.
How hard is it to get kids to come back and participate, like in your band and so forth, once school's wrapped up?
Oh, well, so far it hasn't.
Yeah.
This will be the second year.
Yeah.
This will be the second year that we've had graduation after the last day of school. School was out, yeah. We used to have graduation before school was out, but it hasn't. This will be the second year, I guess. So last year wasn't an issue. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, the calendar after next year will go back 6 days, so it'll be a little bit different.
Okay, any questions? If not, we would ask for a motion to approve this as our calendar for 2012-2013.
Mr. President, I move to approve the calendar of 2012-2013 as presented.
Sorry.
Been moved and second to approve the calendar as presented for the 2012-13 school year. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign, 7-0. Thank you. Our next item of business is the multi-tiered system of support, more commonly called MTSS.
I'm introducing tonight.
Before Ms. Finke introduces, all school districts in the state are required to have some sort of a process for identifying students that are not on standard or meeting standard, which would be described in our current system as being proficient. If they are not, for some reason, you have to have some sort of process for addressing that. MTSS, which stands for Multi-Tiered System of Support, is what the state has identified and are providing support and training for. There are other ones out there. For example, there's one called RTI. That's not a system that the state chose to endorse, but a school district could choose to do that if they wanted to, but you'd be doing it on your own. You wouldn't have any kind of support from the state or training or things like that. You'd have to do all of it yourself. So this is, if you were to reach the point where you no longer meet standards of your own improvement as a school district, which under No Child Left Behind, if you don't hit those benchmark percentages each year, first year you would be on watch, second year you would be on improvement. So you would have to have this, you would want to have this in place as soon as you're on watch, so you can show that you have the processes needed to address those needs. So with that kind of as background, now I'll let you go.
Okay, this will be a little graphic organizer that you see often in this discussion. In the center, there's a triangle that says the few, the some, and the all. That triangle represents the students. They're broken up into 3 groups, which we'll go into more detail later. Then the next biggest shape, that circle, instruction, curriculum, and assessment, that'd be a 3-part strategy to meet student needs. And then the outer circle, professional development, empowering culture, and leadership represents the staff. And that would be teachers, paras, and other staff members that would be associated with this. Okay, and then at the bottom you would have your MTSS current members.
I have one more little handout for you. Ames Web is a universal screener that we'll be using next year for MTSS. And there are 3 tiers, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And this is what I use now for Title I reading to show progress in reading. The example that I'm sharing with you is just one level that shows improvement in Tier 1, which is the green, from the fall testing to the winter testing. And I test 3 times a year, and we'll do the same thing for MTSS 3 times a year. The goal of a multi-tier system of support is to have 80% in Tier 1. Tiers 2 and 3 should have a total of 20% or less. So as you can see, we have many children who need intervention in one of the 5 levels, which is K through 4, that I deal with in reading. So you can kind of see there, we don't quite have enough green, but we do show progress, which is my goal for Title I reading. But with the intense and the supplemental help in MTSS, it should make that green go up, hopefully to 80%.
The difference, we're trying to do this across the district, and the challenges that the 7212 building has are different than K6 would have. We try to find, we're right now trying to find ways where we can put this in during the day and where we can provide extra instruction for those kids beyond the core instruction that they get each day, for those who need intervention and need extra help. So we're still looking at ways to do that, identifying those students relative to reading, who's below the 25th percentile, and we have kids like that in each of our grades. I think it's 10 to 20% in each grade, 7 through 12, that score below the 25th percentile on the STAR reading test. As one example. So we are still looking at ways how we can go about doing that in our building. And it's going to look a little different than what it does in the elementary building. So that's kind of where we're, just to give you a little background about how we can incorporate that during a school day, in a 7-period day, and find time to do that, provide more instruction than what we're doing already.
So is everyone assessed, or is it more as needed to, everyone's assessed to figure out where they are in the tier, is that right?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, yeah, they all have the assessment, and like Mrs. Russell said about, you want to get 80% tier one. And we have a lot more number of kids that are up in different levels, different tiers than they should be. And you
How does
test
that compare to the portion of kids we have in special, I mean, it's considered special education, isn't it? Title I? Or
Well,
is it?
if you look at that tier, you see tier 2 and tier 3. Tier 2 is more Title I. Tier 3, the intensive, that's more special ed, what we're doing right now.
Neither of what's being described is, the green is tier 1, I'm sorry, yeah, and tier 2 and tier 3, neither of those are technically tied to any of those things. Title I is not tied to special ed, and you might find in MTSS reading, you might find that you have a higher percentage of kids that would qualify for Title I in there, just because they have reading needs. You've already identified that. And you might find a higher percentage of kids that are special ed in tier 3 or tier 1. But there's nothing that ties those. They're not linked. It's just there would be a correspondence there, but there's no linkage there that causes that to happen. So.
And I'd like to clarify just a little bit more on your question about assessment. Mrs. Russell mentioned that Ames Web will be our universal screener in elementary. Star Reading is the universal screener in 712. And it's just that, it's a screener. All children will have that 3 times a year. It's kind of like you go to the doctor and they take your blood pressure. It's a screener. Kids that get kicked out, have high blood pressure, then they will go through some other assessments, diagnostic assessments, to figure out why they got kicked out on this universal screener.
And then the instruction strategies that are selected are specific to what those additional diagnostics are. So, like if you have a kid who has difficulty with estimating in math, doing addition is, that'd be 3rd grade maybe, they have difficulty with that. You would have additional instruction geared toward helping them understand that concept. And so, once you're in, if you get into tier 2 in something, you might be in tier 2 for one specific thing, and as soon as you master that, you're back in tier 1. You're not doing the additional stuff anymore. For some kids that have greater need, they may be in there longer. For some kids, if it's lesser need, the amount of time is based on how long it takes to get them to be proficient or master whatever it is they're lacking. So.
Are you doing this within the classroom or pull out or both? Trying to do.
MTSS next year?
Is it going to be a combination of working with the teachers and working with you? I'm assuming, is Teresa, are you going to be on this too?
The whole staff will be,
So,
the whole staff.
they'll be
everybody.
primarily doing it in the classroom, just observation and working in different groups to help master the areas that they're weak in.
The supplemental and the intensive, the tiers 2 and 3, they will be in groups of 5 or less with individual people, teachers.
So there's a good chance they might be pulled out of their class. Say we had a 4th grader that a 3rd grader and a 4th grader might be missing the same skill. Well, we might, is this correct, be grouping, different grades if they're missing the same skill. Because the idea is we've got to fill the holes, regardless of where they're at.
This is kind of like a transitional teaching, and you're just working them into where they need to be.
Right. It's math, reading, and behavior. Those 3, is that right?
We have worked on the math and reading. The behavior part still doesn't have anything developed at this point, and that is kind of the pattern in most districts. We'll do the math and reading first, and then behavior comes 3rd, and also I don't know why, but I think it's the nature of how high schools and junior highs operate. Implementation tends to be faster at elementary than it does at junior high and high school, just because of how junior highs and high schools are structured. They're set up on bell schedules and things like that, and so it's a little bit harder, and they're departmentalized. Because elementary teachers are all gifted and can teach all of those things as compared to junior high and high school. Please don't take offense if there's junior high and high school. So anyway, junior high and high school, it's so much content driven, it is much harder to restructure that and to have those teachers able to go someplace else to work with a small group like that. So that's the challenge of junior high and high school is working with. So.
Dr. Kenworth?
Yes.
Say my daughter's in a tier 3, would I be notified as a parent so I could work with her?
I think there are some conversations that go on like that, especially at tier 3. Tier 2, I can't remember if there's a notification. I'm looking at principals here.
Well, at present, yeah, there's a notification when children are going into Title I, receive Title I services. And yes, I mean, again, we're trying to be efficient, and we're going to be most efficient if everybody's on board working on the same thing at school, at home, that we've got consistency and we're not fragmenting instruction in any way.
One component that would definitely involve parents that will probably develop over time is having like little workshops for parents that want to help in certain areas, and they can come and attend like a little night class that talks about, okay, so how do you work with your kid to help them reinforce this concept so you can have the skills to do that. So it won't be as specific as what the diagnostic stuff is, but it will help parents understand how they can support things.
All right, next. What is MTSS? MTSS is a system of prevention by using early intervention and support. It's going to ensure that all students, both struggling and advanced learners, are achieving to high standards academically. We've talked about the different tiers. So during MTSS time, Tier 1 are your students that aren't really struggling. They're the ones that pass the screener. They're doing fine. We plan during MTSS time, these learners will broaden their reading literacy by doing enrichment activities such as project-based learning or book studies. Tier 2, after, they're the ones that maybe failed the universal screener, so we're going to do the diagnostic test. The diagnostic test is going to target, it's going to tell us what skills are missing. So we can, so then those kids will be worked with in small groups of not more than 5, specifically on the skills that are missing. And then your Tier 3 are your students that are struggling. They've got a lot of areas, that need help, so they're going to get intensive help. They will receive more help, more time to develop these missing skills. They will be worked in smaller groups of not more than 3.
And then I get to answer the question of what would the professional development day look like. Sorry. Several people have asked, why do you need so much time to work on this? Why did we ask for the extra time with the calendar? Well, we are going to need to be looking over data from the monthly testing to find out the skills that need to be retaught. So they do the diagnostic, find the details, and we have to get those plans ready to figure out who needs to be retaught. We also need to find and organize the fluid groups by their needs. Now, fluid means that they're in there 1 week, and like Dr. Kenworth said, if they pass that skill, then they move on to the next thing that they need to work on. That group is not set for any length of time. They can be in there for 3 days. They can be in there for 3 months. I mean, it's fluid. It flows as they need it. And the next thing, we're going to need to collaborate with the other teachers, because as we talked about, sometimes you'll have a 3rd grader and a 1st grader or a 2nd grader needing the same skills. So you would need to target them. You're going to need to communicate with the different teachers and let them know that, make sure we're keeping them on target. And we also need to organize our paraeducators and our building aides. They will be responsible at times for a group. What our plans are to have 30 minutes every day with each kid, or each of these classes in different groups. So somebody has to be with those groups. And like Teresa said, some of them are going to be groups of 3, some will be groups of 5, and others are our on-target students. If there's 20 of them in a class that are on target, then those 20 can be together in a group. But your teacher's going to be reteaching for that 30 minutes. So we need to train our other helpers to make sure everybody is on track and they know what they're teaching, and keeping all the jobs, clear. So we do need that time to help organize everything, because there's going to be a lot of organizing and reorganizing as we go through. And as we've got it set up now, that'll be 1 meeting a month, so we're going to organize for 4 weeks. So that's how we'll use our staff development time.
I'm the last person, and this Cheryl, and I didn't get any of this. Should get extra points for nobody else. Whoops. Are all throw papers? All right. This is information on what happens when schools put MTSS in place. And the handout I'm giving you is two-sided, and being someone who's spent a lot of time in science, I like data that comes from large groups. So this is data from large groups of students. And really probably the most important one to look at right now is the side that is titled Early Intervention Changes Reading Outcomes. You can see, let's look at our low risk on early screening line, not top line. So you can see Christmas of kindergarten, children that are low risk on early screening. By the time they're in 4th grade, they're performing at a 5th grade level. Kids that are ahead to begin with, stay ahead. So now let's look at the kids that are low or high risk on early screening down here. Kids that are high risk on early screening fall further and further behind as the years progress. So what we're trying to do with MTSS is right up here with research-based core and extra instructional intervention. So this is what we're trying to do with these children that are high risk on these early screenings. And then on the other side you can see, again, this is different research, but we see the same kind of patterns here with our kids that are low risk and kids that are high risk. And what this one is saying is we often intervene too late. When this gap has widened and when the amount of time for effective intervention, it's too much. We don't have enough time in the school day. So again, MTSS, we're trying to be more efficient with our time. We're trying to target intervention to exactly what the children need so we can close that gap between our high risk on screening and our low risk on screening kiddos. I do also have data. Mrs. Kim Wolf and Mrs. Laura Davis were kind enough to share the data that they have collected since they've been doing MTSS at Stafford and Maxville. I also have a friend who's a principal in Minneapolis, and she was kind enough to share her data. And they are seeing, and I have that, if you would like me to make you copies, I'd be happy to do so later, but they are seeing gains. They're seeing gains in fluency rates for students. Right now we're focused on reading. Minneapolis is the only school that's doing reading and math right now. They are seeing fluency gains, and then sometimes spectacular fluency gains by targeting interventions. Stafford has also been able to move some children off of modified state assessments onto general state assessments. And for us, that's, a huge accomplishment. So, there is, not only national data on how this can work, but we've got data from other small districts and neighboring districts that's saying, yeah, we're seeing some progress and it's working. So, anyway, that's my part. Any questions?
Are you the last presenter?
I am.
Oh, okay. I do have a question. With the improvement, assuming that as they improve with their reading and their math and things, that it encourages and gives them higher self-esteem, does that kind of interact with the behavior modification and start? So maybe that is something that would, kind of, what do I want to say, take care of itself in a little bit, or is there still?
My initial answer would be, yeah, that makes sense. I have to admit, I haven't done a lot of reading or research on the behavior part of MTSS. Right now, we have really solely focused on reading, and so all of my...
I just wondered with the extra information they've gotten from the other schools, if they've made that comment or assessment.
I haven't heard that comment. I didn't ask that specifically. I don't know if any of you have talked to other people, but it makes sense that, children who are more successful in the classroom are generally, and also, sometimes our behavior issues are children that aren't challenged enough, and this, gives that chance for the kids that are on track to have a little supplemental something, a project or a book study, or, that extra thing that may challenge them, and that's going to be good for those kids too.
Just thought it would be interesting.
Yeah.
See on that.
Just to reemphasize the point, and if you I hope you got a chance to look at the brochures and the information that was sent on the MTSS stuff. But one of the things that Ms. Zeke's just made a point of, for kids that are not on grade level by the time they hit 3rd or 4th grade, what the research points to is they will probably never be on grade level by the time they get out of high school. That's a pretty scary thought. Not that the kids are scary, but the idea that we can't help them, even with extra time, extra effort. So early intervention is great. That doesn't mean we only do it at the early grades. We continue to do it on the grades on up, because one of the things that we'll find is there are some kids who may do really well at most stuff and then have, for some reason, some sort of a gap and have some area that seems like should be easy for them, but it's not. So they may still, in the upper grades, may still have to have additional help so that they do have that skill when they graduate. So, but that's the primary importance, since I wanted to re-emphasize that. So, any other questions about this? It is a fairly significant undertaking in any district, and there are very, very few districts I know of that try to take on all three at the same time. Most of them do it either the math or reading first, and then following year start working with the other content area, and then if things are going well, then we'll branch into the behavior area. We're fortunate in that we don't have a lot of behavior issues. There are things that can be addressed, but I think it will be interesting to see, like you're saying, if you have kids that aren't frustrated because they're not being successful, are they going to be less of a behavior problem? I think that's a great observation that we hope will be the case. Yeah.
If there's no further comments, we'll move on to the next item of business, common core.
thank you everyone for
Yes, thank you.
helping.
Thank you.
Yeah. You may have heard about this in the press. For example, it's even getting some media coverage in the legislature because someone proposed a bill that would require the Department of Education to stop all efforts at implementing Common Core standards until a cost study was done. We already know that a cost study is going to cost us more money, and we also know that as we're applying for this waiver, one of the things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have some type of more universal standards for educating our kids. The waiver does not specifically say it has to be Common Core, but the reason why so many states are doing this is because it saves them the trouble and cost and expense of having to do it. Basically, experts in a lot of different fields across states came together and developed these standards. Most all states have some type of education standards. I mean, Kansas has some right now, but they don't match up as well as we like, and sometimes very poorly against other states. And when you look internationally, in some areas they become quite different. So we had this initiative that was to develop these Common Cores in English language arts and math, and there are a few other little areas, but these are the primary focuses to start. And the other focus is on learning expectations for kids, not how kids get there. This is not prescriptive in terms of how you teach kids. It simply identifies what you want the kids to know. And you don't have to change how you teach or buy a whole bunch of new equipment or things like that. It simply says these are the things we want kids to know. And then you can still use whatever methods or means you want for getting kids there. The reasons, as I already kind of talked about a little bit, lots of disparity, differences across state lines in terms of what those standards were. Students move, and so if you have a kid move from one state to another, at one elementary grade level you might be getting fractions, and you might get it at the previous grade in a different state. And so this kind of makes that universal across states. The criticism that you'll hear about that is, well, it becomes a federally mandated curriculum. Yeah, sort of, except the federal government isn't doing it. It's all these other agencies, colleges, things like that have coordinated doing this. So this does not come from the federal government. But the federal government is aware of it and are requiring the states do something along these lines. They don't say what. It also mentions global competition. That's where the international part comes, because more and more our kids are going to have to compete against kids from other countries. And it would be good that they had the same set of job skills and the same set of knowledge background for that. So that's kind of the why now part. It's kind of a natural progression. We've always, for the last 15, 18 years, had standards of some type that all the schools in the state have used, and most other states have been developing those. So it just kind of makes sense, kind of a natural progression, that they would then start to look at each other's and say, well, let's see how we can match these up. There's a lot of research out there now saying what things need to be done in terms of at what grade level, in terms of certain types of content. There may be some efficiencies and coordination that can be done. That's probably more in a bigger district. Smaller districts will probably still operate about the same just because they have small numbers of kids. Whether you consider this an upside or a downside, it allows for easier comparisons. Right now, if we were to compare state to state on how our kids are performing, if you do it by state standards, it doesn't work very well because they aren't measuring the same thing. You'd have to do something like the National Assessment of Education Progress, the NAEP, or ACT, or something like that to get somewhat of a snapshot of that. But this will allow for greater comparability. So that's probably a fear for some, because it will reveal what places are doing better than others. So. And please ask questions as you go through this if they occur to you. So, these are some of the criteria they looked at. They wanted to have fewer standards, but have them clearer and what they consider to be higher quality. So I guess you can think of it this way. In some states, their standards were a mile wide and an inch deep. They covered a lot of stuff, but the kids didn't really get too much out of it. They're wanting to have more depth and fewer things. Now how that will change what's going to happen in the classroom is that when a kid walks out of whatever it is, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, wherever grade we're starting to teach fractions, the expectation will be that when they get to that next grade, they know fractions. It's not like you're going to keep every year kind of reteaching fractions a little bit more. So that's part of what this, and then I guess then from that standpoint you might pick up some efficiencies in that. So. Also aligned with college and work expectations. There's a component of this, I mean, in some sense it sounds maybe like it's geared more toward college, but also there's a component of it that will start to be what are called soft skills. Those are less developed yet, but they will be developed. Those type of interpersonal skills and things that students need to be able to have to compete and work well in careers that may not be from a college background. When you consider that probably 20% or less of the jobs out there nowadays require a 4-year degree, you'd be better off if the skills you have will move you in that other direction. So, let's see. This is kind of after the fact, but this is how the standards were developed. Started in the summer of 2009. As I said, they come from a wide variety of areas. National agencies, things like National Council for Teachers of Math and language arts agencies, colleges, schools, all types of areas that people were involved in developing this. So they then had the draft copies of them. They sent them out to states to review, to different agencies to review. They were kind of revised, came back, and then the final drafts came out. I think they were last summer. These are just some examples of some of the advances, changes that occur as a result of these standards. These are developed around language arts, and it says ELL. I think that stands for English Language Arts. It's much more encompassing. For example, right now in the state, we have reading tests. We don't have to do them very often, but we have writing tests. This incorporates all that stuff into one kind of component or standard. Also, the standards have clear delineation on what is taught at what grade and when. It doesn't say what day it has to be on or what week, but as you look at them, there probably will be, just in terms of how schools operate and schedules are on, you'll probably be able to tell with some sort of idea approximately where kids are in each stage. There's no schedule or anything that says that, but just as you look at it, you'll kind of see that it could develop something like that. The math advances, kind of a greater focus in the early grades on arithmetic and operations. It will look considerably different, especially when you get to high school. This is where some of the international impact comes in. For example, now we have classes that are identified like algebra, geometry, algebra 2. Might be a sequence. It'll just be called Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, or Math 9, or Math 10, Math 8. It won't have a title on it eventually. It'll be the set of math skills you need for this year is going to be taught. Because there are some things, when you have it set up as algebra, geometry, algebra 2, there are things that are in geometry that might be beneficial to teach while you're doing algebra. And so rather than saying, well, that's it, put that off until next year, that's geometry class, those things will be pulled in. So it'll be different, because they'll be recognizable like they were before. So, one of the big impacts is yet to be seen on this. A lot of times, especially in math classes, one of the things that drives the class is the textbook. And it will be, I mean, they'll still have a textbook and a lot will come out of that probably, but there will be other things that'll have to be pulled in to allow that to happen. Probably textbook publishers rapidly scramble and restructure and make them look like these standards. That's probably happening already. So, how you read the standards, I'm not going to show you all the standards tonight. I'll let you do that for bedtime reading. But the standards each have the standard, the clusters that are related to it, and then the domains. The standard is what they should be able to do. The cluster are those things that are related to it or are closely related to it. And then the domains are those standards that kind of fall into those clusters. The way what one would look like, this is one for math. So you have the cluster or the standard up there of ratios and proportional relationship. I'm going to flip ahead. I think I have one that has a label for us. Oh, there we go. So like there's the grade level, the standard, the cluster. Oh, I was calling it wrong. That's the domain. So every one of the standards would have, when you go to the website, I'll give you the website here for you in a little bit. You can go there, you can look at all of them, and it'll take you through step by step what each of these are. And each one of them will have one of these parts. You notice that one, it says 6RP. So the 6 tells you grade 6, and the RP, there are codes. Each grade has different emphasis domains or focus domains. So there might be 6, 7, or 8 domains that kind of focus at that grade. And so the RP is just the ratios and proportion part. That's how they abbreviate that down to be able to do that.
Do we have a curriculum like this for the school? Currently, it just may not be the same particular standards and.
Yes. Mandated by the state. It's what all the teachers, particularly those teachers that teach in math or language arts reading, things like that, science, social studies, that's what they use as their guide to make sure that their kids are prepared for the state assessment. That's not the only thing.
State assessment.
Yeah, that's not the only thing that they teach, but they want to make sure that as they're teaching, that they are getting those things. They call them delta indicators. There's deltas besides certain state standards, and you know that those are going to be tested. There are
What about
others.
the subjects that don't get state tested?
Is what?
What about the subjects that don't get tested?
There are
State
not.
assessment.
Well, no, there are curriculums for those, but they're just not state standards for assessment.
And we get to develop those in our own way, or how does
Well,
that
most
work?
of those are still developed by the state. I don't think we have anything that's locally developed. It's all from the state now. I mean, there are. I don't think they call them curriculum guides. That's what we used to call them.
Art
They just
standards.
are just state standards for.
Sorry? There's art standards.
Yeah, there's
Math
art.
standard.
Just about
Computer,
everything.
yeah, there's standard,
Yeah. There just aren't. You won't see documents like this that have delta indicators and stuff because they're not state assessment items. This is just showing a different one for math and language arts. One of the things that, and I don't recall whether this is required, but there's a component where states can then add 15% additional stuff on top of whatever those standards are, however they want to kind of personalize them to their state. So these are some of the extra things that the state of Kansas is putting into the English language arts. These are not broken out by grade level, so it's, they're very general, but there would be certain things in different grades that might be pulled out of some of this. And then there's also additional in the area of math. NCTM is the National Council on Teachers of Math. And I know you don't have time to read all that through the night, but these are also some very broad areas that the state is wanting to incorporate into it. Many of these are going to tie in more to the work skills, those soft skills I was talking about, as compared to the actual specific content type things in math and reading. These are skills that will make someone a good employee for those 80% of jobs that don't require a college education. So this is where this part is starting to dovetail back into some of the stuff that's being done with our career and technical education programs. We're starting to incorporate more of these type things into it, so as it comes along. And those are revised every year, those particular programs. So some of this stuff will start to appear there, I'm sure, as those are developed. As I said, if you're having trouble sleeping, you can go to corestandards.org. They have all of them, and you can read them all. It's 250-some pages of documents. I would encourage you to do it a little bit, just so you can see what type of things they're doing at what grade level. Because there are some things that are moving somewhat significantly in terms of when they're covered. So, and I'll send this email out to you, this address out to you as well. So to kind of summarize, to wrap up, I think there is some out there that are kind of scared of the Common Core standards. And I think that is somewhat behind the legislation that was proposed that would stop everything until a cost study was done. We already have standards that we operate under for our curriculums. It's just that they're not in common with other states, and they don't have similarities to what's being done internationally. And all this does is kind of put us on the same playing field with everybody else. There are some that probably are critical of that. As mobile as our society is today, I know our teachers can probably speak to this. It would be so nice to have kids coming in from other states and knowing what the curriculum was they had. Even in classes, like I mentioned, some of those math classes you would think would be fairly sort of standard. They're not. And so I think this is a move in that direction. So we have done some preliminary awareness with all of our staff, specifically with our early elementary, our primary grades. They have had a much more intensive look at it because that's the grades that are first coming online and using this stuff. So they've had some workshops, multi-day workshops with this. Most of the rest of the staff has just had some introduction to it, but we'll continue to have more. Questions?
questions, we'll move on to the next item, which is family consumer science.
To give you a little bit of history, some board members are newer than others at this. We used to have a full-time family and consumer science teacher. As we have lost enrollment, when teachers have retired or moved on or things like that, we have tried to take advantage of that and restructure our programs around that. Sometimes that involves sharing staff, and that's what we did a year ago with Stafford. We both had needs for a family and consumer science teacher and felt like we could do it with a half-time position. Because of some health issues, the person who was doing that wasn't able to do that this year, and we were fortunate. Janet Richardson came back and has been a full-time sub for us doing that in place of that person. As we look, and Janet has indicated, as gracious as she was to do it this year, she said, I'm not doing it again. And she's retired, so I don't blame her. But we need to do, look at what we're going to do with our programming. We have what I see as three basic options. One would be to do away with the program, which I do not propose that. I do not support that, but I feel like I have to give you because that is a possibility. One would be to try to find someone who might do it part-time like we currently have been doing it, or half-time. The other would be to add a little bit to our expenses or increase some of our salary load and go back to a full-time position. Going to a full-time position, as I said, would have a little bit of additional cost. A couple things to consider with that, though. We may not be able to find a part-time person. And also, as we have made other reductions in places, we have fewer elective choices for kids. And so it might be a place where we can add back a little bit, pick up some electives and give kids some additional choices. It's getting, I know we talked to Mr. Bergen, it's getting pretty tight, particularly with our junior high kids, to try to get them scheduled into electives. So that would be one argument for going back to full-time. But as I said, it will be at a cost, because it's just going to cost more for full-time than half-time. We're at that time of year where we need to be advertising and trying to fill the position, so we're looking for some guidance from the board. Some questions that you have?
My understanding was that if we use this position to offer a life skills curriculum of some sort, I don't know if we use it, does it have to be a full year class, but it would offer the opportunity to get another $300 per student?
Well, we actually, currently the class is already set up in a pathway. It's in a career tech ed pathway. We offer 3 classes a day to show you, we have tried to be efficient and creative with this. In a pathway you have to have an introductory class, and then you have to have 3 follow-up classes if you want to have completers. And you get funded for those other 3, but you have to have those to have the pathway. You have to offer those to have the pathway, otherwise you don't get any of the funding. You don't have the pathway. We have the pathway, and so our challenge was, how do we get an introduction class and 3 other classes you can take out of a person that only teaches 3 classes a day? And what we've done is, one of the other people in the building teaches one of the classes that counts. And that's the personal finance class, which is going to be retitled, I think, to economic education, consumer education. So the content is still the same. So And the pathway, it doesn't have to be the same person that teaches all those. So that's how we're leveraging that. So we already have the pathway, so yeah, and it is kind of a life skills sort of pathway.
Is it the issue of getting more students to take the life skills class that would, or am I misunderstanding the concept of being able to increase the number of students that qualifies for that $300 compensation?
And that may occur because some of the classes that right now we just offer once a day, if we're able to offer some of them twice a day, but also we're looking at how can we have some other choices for junior high kids. Junior high kids you don't get a reimbursement for that. And I think they may allow us to take the introduction class at junior high. But at the high school level, the ones that count for funding, they have to be a high school kid. So we might see some. That's not our purpose in proposing full-time. We might get some additional funding that way, but our purpose is to create more elective choices for some kids.
You get the additional funding when they have completed all 4 classes?
No, you get it for any of those funded classes. There's 3 funded classes. They take any of them, you get funding for them. But you do need to have some kids that are what are called completers. They don't all have to be completers, but you do have to have some that go through the whole sequence.
And so then what does the introductory class, it's required for the pathway but doesn't receive the
funding.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Is it unrealistic for the teacher that teaches the one class already to pick up the other 2? Or?
That is outside their area of expertise, so yeah, that wouldn't work. So they're not certified for that either.
So the part-time person would have to be certified to teach the facts classes.
And we do have someone in the community that's certified. I have visited with them, but they have not gotten back to me at this point. It didn't sound promising that they would be willing to look at it. So.
Is that full-time or part-time?
Part-time. I don't think they have any interest at all. I mean, it was kind of iffy for part-time. Full-time, definitely.
And if there's someone that has content expertise but not certification with teaching, there's a possibility of doing a provisional certification, is that correct? Or
Yeah, but I can't remember if you're able to get funding if they're provisionally certified. I'd have to check that one.
I almost think you have to be fully qualified.
Yeah, I think
you have to be fully qualified.
So that's a more practical option to say a math teacher that's an engineer or something like that, because that's not VOTEC, and so then you don't get, the funding is not an issue, is that?
Yeah, the fully qualified, I think you'd have to be fully qualified. Because that would show up on the licensed personnel report if they weren't fully qualified.
So they're going to have to have something that's related to family and consumer.
Yeah, they have to have something in that area. That the state says that you're qualified, because you're licensed in that area.
I'm saying if you had a food scientist or something that.
They'd have to have.
And it's more of an issue with vocation than it is with other teaching areas, is that correct? With vocational education?
Well, no, they all have to be certified in their area.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter what subject matter. Yeah, you'd have to be, if you were had a science degree and you taught science, but you'd have to have a math degree if you want to teach math. You'd still be not qualified, if you get what I'm trying to say there. You wanted to teach math, and you were only certified in science, you couldn't teach math.
Is that what your question is?
Is that?
No.
That's okay, I'm not,
Oh.
I'm not gonna believe you.
Ask it a different way.
It's okay.
I think that I would just as soon move to a full-time position. One is I think it gives us more, and I know it's additional cost, but I just feel like this is the one area that we're going to see a lot more move to is in the career and technical education. And I think once we get a person on board, that we could see what career opportunities or that we could aspire them to teach. And I think right now, Mrs. Richardson's done a nice job of trying to get the program just certified in a pathway, but there's some other additional possible pathways that we can look at that is along those lines that are meeting the needs of students. One is, I'm just a firm believer that you've got to have teachers, not just online courses. And we've kind of cut back a little bit in our vocational areas in recent times here, and I think that we need to look back toward a full-time position if possible. Hope we're not too late looking, but this is a good time to be looking at next month.
I mean, what we would do is, our recommendation would be that we seek out a full-time person. And there's no guarantee that we'll find one. And if we're not able to find one that we'd be comfortable with, then perhaps we go back to the person in town that might be willing to do it part-time as a fallback. But we won't know if we don't get out there pretty quick.
What's the projected additional cost?
Well, it depends on the experience of the person we get. If we were to get someone that is first year out of college, the difference is going to be, and I think Janet Richardson had some of those projections maybe in a letter that she gave to the board, probably around $12,000 roughly. But if you have someone that has experience, it might double to 25. So,
I got a couple questions. I think it would be nice to have a full-time, but I'm going back in my brain to when we went to sharing the position and we had all these classes that we were teaching and there was no one, basically, the numbers were pathetically small. And it was a thing that we're not getting much bang for our buck there. And that's why we kind of went to the idea of sharing, which there isn't anyone to share with now. But how are we going to have kids take it and be worthwhile? And then where's the money coming from to pay for it? That's mine.
Short-term answer is worst case scenario, you can pay for it out of contingency. Depending, I'm kind of getting into the next, one of the next items coming up on legislative report, but at least at this point, it looks like there might be some additional funding. And so it can support that.
But additional funding, but we've got increase in insurance and
potentially, we don't know yet.
We'll have negotiation stuff with the teachers here in another couple months. And
based on what the legislature is currently proposing, we would probably be looking at the one side you adjust for declining enrollment and stuff, somewhere between perhaps $40,000 and $50,000 of additional funding. Right now, I don't know anything about health insurance. They haven't told us yet. Property insurance is probably going to be $4,000 or $5,000 more.
the what? Oh,
Property insurance. Well, that's actually, it's a combination. It's our property, vehicle, and workers' comp, all three. So, we may not find anyone. I know we're trying to find someone to the east of us. I don't know if they've had any success there either. So,
well, I don't think it hurts to look, I guess. It's just concern that I've got.
sure. But I think it's a valid concern.
Because part of going to halftime was
Yeah.
that there weren't any kids taking this, and what good does pathway or whatever we were saying when no one's taking it.
And that's
Because they are stuck. You're required to take all these other classes. Part of it is there aren't that many to choose from.
Your pathway classes, are they set what they are as far as she has to, or the person, the teacher has to teach a cooking class, a sewing class?
Yeah, I mean, yes, to your premise, the classes are not, they're more life skills oriented than that.
Does that happen to be the chart of pathways?
Yeah, but I don't think it's up to date. It's several years
You
old.
mind if I-
so- No, please.
I was gonna say, you know that
There are.
food and science, it could be a huge pie that somebody can come in and just really take the program to a whole different level if they don't have to teach
Good luck in that state.
a certain group. I mean, food science alone is, you can get a job anywhere
Well,
in the world with
but we
food
might-
science,
would
but
we
you
need
can
to-
move towards that direction.
we would need to adjust our, what do you call it? No, yeah, there's a special word for it, isn't it? The curriculum in vocational has its own, you would have, you know, doesn't it? We would have to apply for a new
We would just apply for a different pathway.
pathway.
These are called clusters here, and then these are the pathways out here. For example, we have an architecture and construction one, we have a production one that comes under manufacturing, and
So what is our existing FACS curriculum? Where's the pathway
Yeah.
for it?
the right name here.
I mean, you could go down to that human services,
That's-
is that what it
that's where
is?
it's at.
Well, look at all the early childhood development. I mean, there's a ton of direction that you could go in there.
Second.
All that's great, but I think it goes back to what Dan was talking about with enrollment.
Well, you have to kind of encourage kids to be a part of it and
How
see
many
that.
kids you have this year in the,
In the 3 classes we have,
yeah.
there's quite a few. 3 classes, 22, 23,
So-
something like that.
Well, that's a good size number.
That's not bad, yeah, it's not bad for 3 classes.
But
yeah.
it was basically, you know, a few years ago, we had the paper with enrollment for each class.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really that many more for set.
But if you
for
change
6 periods.
the courses that they're teaching or the
Well,
path that they're teaching, maybe you might get more kids.
well, I'm not arguing that, I'm just saying that back then,
Yeah,
there wasn't anyone
well, I think,
taking them.
What,
You
okay,
need to
and
start
aside
thinking out of
from,
the
what are
box.
we offering besides, this isn't gonna
So
work either.
it's
Okay,
under
so we
human
have
services.
you guys are doing a
Human
good job.
services, we
And
have
then the fourth one. yeah, we
architecture
have
and
these two.
construction,
And then
IT?
The fourth one, no,
It's in that one, information technology.
yeah, it's in there, but it's not.
Every name's under that.
Yeah. This is,
I don't have a problem trying it.
this is.
where I'm going with this is, I don't think we need to be cutting back on this type of education. But if we're starting from scratch, but the thing is, we don't have time to adjust our pathway at this point in the year. But if we were starting over, I wonder if we would choose this all over again, as opposed to whatever it is, you know, ag, food, and natural resources, or business management, or, I mean, could be any of them. Yeah,
map marketing.
arts, AV, technology and communications, I mean,
We did reduce, so we will no longer have what we would call a business pathway in terms of like accounting, that's what it traditionally would have been. It has been rolled into this, and so it's a component of the technology discussion. There's still a business part to it. And we also incorporated in our yearbook for digital media type of stuff. So we're trying to use what we currently have for programs and look at pathways that give more interest to kids.
Well, I think that you could start with this, maybe if, depending on who the individual is at the time, you can move into other areas like the one above. I think there's some things with, from the business side. I serve on the state committee that oversees approving all these pathways. Hospitality and tourism is becoming larger and larger. The tourism aspect of it is, but also the cool when it's passed is under finance. Over there, they've done quite a bit of work, and everything's just kind of in a work in progress right now. Actually, the ag one is probably the strongest one of all of them, but everything's just evolving. And I really think that we can't leave out the home life of parenting, and I think that's just something that we've got to push, and a lot of that should be done early on in the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and don't forget about these kids are going to transition when they're juniors and seniors, and we may be changing depending on what the law does, or some of those courses are taught at the junior college level. So we need to be thinking of the career field, the pathways at the middle school level, where to start focusing on. And I think it's depending on the teacher and what they present, we could get an experienced teacher, or we could a beginning teacher, but I think we've got to expand our CTE programs. I think we're kind of limiting. I agree with what you're saying, Carolyn. It's just, I think we've got something going, and the nice thing about it is that Janet has done a tremendous amount of work in keeping everything current, because they were due today, today. Today you had as the last day you could submit them for next year. And so, we're a year away from changing everything.
So we did submit a pathway for PACS.
I don't have a problem trying. It's my only concern is of everything we do, that if we're taking the money out of our contingency to pay for it, at some point in time, we'll run out of that money.
I think there's few ways to distinguish your school at this point besides those extra programs. If you're looking at reasons that people should want to continue to choose this district, it's the extra program. It's not the core curriculum. Everybody's got that. It's the extra stuff that distinguishes your school, I think.
I agree, but at the same time, you can have all these different things, and I don't want to take a class online and learn it, and to say that I have this class or that class and it's online, I know I'm not going to get anything out of it. Very little. That's personal preference of mine.
So are you needing a motion to move forward, or what are you, what's the wishes of?
As long as we have some sort of consensus, because if we were to find someone, the board would still have to approve it, but that would be our intent, would be to look for a full-time, unless I hear indication from the board not to do that.
I think we need to be progressive and look for a full-time one and see where we come up.
I think it'd be easier to try and find a full-time.
I think there's people
bigger
out there
group
that
that can-
have their license in this, and they can also maybe teach math and maybe science.
Freelance
Marketing, yeah.
Coach girls sports.
You don't think there is?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Well, that's where I was getting at with having to be certified. I mean,
Well, sometimes an experienced teacher, and it's just like the one that was coming over here part-time had a history major as well, so they were able to, and actually science as well. A lot of teachers will have those extra endorsements that pick up that.
Yes.
But I think as we think about the MTSS you know, we need staff. We need qualified staff that helps with that, not paraeducators, because I really think that it's the staff that makes that go, not the paraeducators. My observation of it. And I agree with Stan. I just said keep the money in the wallet, but you know, the other thing is, you know, we sometimes gotta go on the limb. You gotta step out, and because it's really what makes our schools those extra programs that we have that have highly qualified teachers.
If we're gonna compete, we need to figure out how to make it work.
Everybody in agreement?
Go for it.
Okay, number 5, legislative update.
I'll keep this brief. Basically, there weren't any bills related to education in any significant way in terms of funding or anything like that that were decided by the end of the session. They will come back, I think it's April 24th or 25th is the veto session. I anticipate that it will probably be a longer veto session than we normally see. They're still a long ways from reaching any kind of agreement. They sort of look like they get close at times and then it kind of falls apart. What is out there right now, House Bill 2200 that we've talked about before, would give us $74 per FTE kid over what we are getting this year. That's where I came up with the between $40,000 and $50,000 figure. That would be if we got that. That could be negotiated down to something to reach an agreement. I don't know, so we won't know until we get to that point. So the other thing that will be interesting and potentially scary is which issue they choose to take up first. If they take up the tax issue first and pass a tax bill of some kind that reduces revenue, that may pull the legs out from underneath the school finance bill. So if you want to communicate with our representatives and senators, encourage them that they settle the school finance bill first, so that we know what we're actually going to get before the legs get pulled out. One of the interesting things that developed just today, and we'll probably hear more about, one of the big things that was being pushed by the governor's office and by others in the legislature was the idea of reducing personal income tax. And I think there are some good things that can happen with that, but an unintended consequence that occurred to someone, I'm kind of surprised it didn't occur before today, but is if you do that, we may be helping fund our surrounding states. Because we do have a significant number of people that live on the border or the perimeter of the state, particularly the eastern side, that live in the surrounding state but work in Kansas. And the way tax stuff works, I actually experienced this when I was teaching in Kansas, Missouri and lived in Shawnee. You earn your money over there, and so the taxes that you earn there go to that state, and you get credit for it in the state you live in. So when you report on your state income tax what you earn, you do report all of it, but you get credit for what you pay the other state. If you suddenly don't have state taxes, the state they live in gets it all. So even though they're working here, all of their taxes, state taxes that we normally would collect, would go to the other state. Does that make sense?
You gotta pay somewhere.
Yep. And so the other states are thrilled to hear that you're doing that. And I don't know how that works out, because there are states that don't have personal income tax. So maybe they just live far from the border or something. So, did you have a comment? That's all I have on legislative. So we got a couple weeks off before they come back. So keep talking to them.
Okay, move on to communications, board member activities. Start with you, Chad. Anything?
I haven't been home long enough to go to anything.
I have nothing to report either.
I'll pass.
I did attend the special ed co-op meeting, and they have hired a director. Comes with some experience in administration type work. I believe it's a good hire for them, and he was at the last meeting. And so we're looking forward to making that transition starting in July. He'll actually start a month early, working through that transition.
Can you say his name?
I could have, but
Andy, I can't think of his last name.
First name's Andy. Where's he from?
Back in northeast Kansas.
We didn't get some bio on him. I mean, or what?
What was it? Close to Silver Lake. Yeah, Oskaloosa.
Oscar.
Rossville. Good job.
So, that's all I have. I just, hopefully you communicated with the legislative people. I've done it a couple times and actually got a couple of responses back. So I would encourage you to use your email to contact your legislative people about how you feel about school finance issues and current bills. I think they'll respond back. Could be negative, could be positive, but at least the more they get, the more they have to think about it. So we'll move on to administrative reports, and we'll start with the elementary principal.
And I believe Dr. Kenworthy attached my elementary report in the board packet. I do have one correction. As of today, we did enroll a new 5th grader. So my K-6 total as of this afternoon is 153. And the rest you can just read.
What's the honors luncheon?
Honors Luncheon is an event that National Honor Society hosts for high school students who are on the honor roll. And that's just coming up since I'm a National Honor Society person and stuck that on there.
Didn't that take the place of the honors banquet?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. The National Honor Society's been doing a great job helping out with different things going on in the elementary, so I'm proud of what those kids are doing for our younger students and appreciative of the high school faculty allowing them to have some flexibility in their schedules and come down and help us out.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Bergen?
You have, let's see, yeah, enrollment, actually in enrollment, we have a new student that came today with the same family that Mrs. Suki just mentioned, so I'm not sure this has ever happened before since I've been here, but we have 153 in each building. Probably the same number in each building. We started, I believe, at 148 in our building when the year started. That's come and going, that's where we're ended up right now. You mentioned a little bit about state assessments that we've been talking about. We've been working on those. We should finish those up probably the first week in May. I mentioned a little bit of junior senior plays coming up next weekend. The junior high, the all sports banquet. We'll do that on the 19th, 6:30. Recognize the junior high kids. Prom, if anybody's interested in dressing up and coming to prom, bring a date, whatever. You can come after prom if you'd like to do that. That's on March 21st. March 27th, Dr. Kimberly and I and Mrs. Hacker, we took, 5 students went to the CPL Honors Banquet. I mentioned the students there. As a league, we take top 10% of your junior and senior class. Sometimes you have ties because 10% of our senior class is 2. And 10% of our junior class would be almost 3. That's who we took. We have another CPL. We have league meetings every other month. As you know, Western Plains is getting out of our league. So we'll have 8 schools in our league for the next 2 years until Ellenwood joins in 14-15. Us and some other schools in our league we play Ellenwood in different sports, which we do in basketball, and we go to their track meets and things like that. So we'll be discussing scheduling and some things, because when schools get out, then you have to adjust scheduling and things to make sure that everything's all covered. And you have to adjust because in our league, we take turns hosting different things, so that rotation schedule has to be adjusted when the school leaves. Just everybody knows there'll be 8 schools for the time being. Track and golf are underway. Chloe Clark and Desiree Hall received 1 rating at Regional Festival, and they all will attend the State Solar Festival on the 28th of April. And a student activity account is in place.
What's the yearbook? The yearbook mine's almost like, that's because of the date.
No, we just got through making a payment. I believe, Dr. Kim, we just got through making a payment to yearbook.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And what will happen,
Where's the difference come from?
it'll come out of the general fund at the
Yeah,
end of the
yeah,
year,
yeah,
but we'll
yeah.
wait and see what because we still have bits
Still
and
have-
pieces of money from
yes,
ads coming in,
correct.
and so once all of that money has been collected, we'll make an adjustment.
What's the latest on proposal for 1A to go back to 1 class instead of 2?
Yeah, there's Mike Castle, there's a gentleman that's superintendent principal down in southeast Kansas. I think that's where he is. Where's the Lee Coffee? No, that's not, is that southeast Kansas? And he's down there, we're sending in, people can send in, and there's talk about getting that reversed. So I think it'll come up again, it'll probably come to the 1A schools and be presented again.
So will that change for next year or the year after?
It would be till 13, 14. And hopefully we won't have to mess it, it would be 2A, we wouldn't mess with it out.
Well, at that point, we probably will be.
Yeah, well, we were on the bubble this year, we were out on the number, so next year we could very well be right on the number. Hopefully we'll be 2A and won't have to mess with any of those odd numbers and all that stuff. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Dr. Kenworthy?
We're in the process of completing our fresh fruit and vegetable grant that we've done in the last couple of years. We're applying for that again. Another round of the 21st Century Community Grants are opening, so we're looking at whether or not we would qualify to apply. If we do, we will apply for that. Also, we are applying for a Monsanto grant. It was kind of interesting. You get nominated, and the people that nominate you have to meet certain criteria. You also have to come from a county that's in a district that has certain criteria as well. Like you have to plant 30,000 acres of soybeans or something like that. Monsanto sets all this up. Anyway, so we qualified. We're in an area that qualifies, and then someone has to nominate you. They have to be a farmer, and they have to be a certain age, and they have to have all these other things. What was fun was when you go in and register to do it, you get to see all the people that nominated you. And I mean, I'm thinking, 1 or 2 people must have nominated us. There must have been 40 people that nominated, so that was kind of funny. So we'll see. There are 2 grants. You can apply for a $10,000 grant, which is just in your region. We'd be in competition with, I think, 7 other counties. Or you can apply for a $25,000 grant and go for the whole state. We're going to apply for the $10,000 grant. This is the first time we thought we'd have a better shot at that, so we'll see what happens. That's a math, science type of grant.
So what would the activity be that the grant supports?
I don't know. We just got the letter. I don't know if they're slow on doing this or not, because we just got the letter last Thursday that we were nominated. Well, they've been having sessions since February on like webinars on how to do the grant, and so there's only like 2 webinars left, so we're going to have to scramble, but we're going to scramble nonetheless.
Well, a month and a half ago, like old man,
Really?
I nominated,
Well,
and so did my wife.
I mean, with all the names that were on there, I thought surely we got the letter sooner than this, but we just got it last week, so. This is financial report. This is the old version. And you can see the different line amounts, what was budgeted, what we expended to date, percent remaining. And then this is the new version. Which I will walk you through a little bit because it looks. It is the same in that it has beginning balances, revenues, expenditures, stuff like that. But it also does have encumbrances and payables on there. The main thing is you have many more categories of things you're looking at. This represents the general fund, the first one I gave you. It represents that first line. The one that is Fund ID 8, that is Code 8, that is the local option budget, the supplemental. Virtually all the rest of them down through 51, and also 55, well actually, all of them except for 53 either come through the general fund or through the local option budget. So many of those funds, if there's a revenue amount there, well, capital outlay, I guess, is an exception too. Where
Bonded interest.
yeah, but let's look, for example, at special education number 30. You can see what the beginning balance was, and you can see the revenue. That is all state flow-through money. That's money that comes from the state through our general fund, and we pay it to the special ed co-op. It comes through our general fund, but it's not our money. It's just the vehicle that they get it there with. Vocational education, number 34, you can see revenue there. If it has revenue there, which it does, that is a transfer. That is money that has come out of either our general fund or our local option budget. That's how that money gets there. So most everything except for, like I said, capital outlay and contingency, any of those revenues that are down there underneath general and supplemental are all transfers out of one of those first two funds. That's how they get their money. Does that make sense?
And so, for example, the technology fund, which has no activity in it, it's
Right.
because we're not transferring anything out of general or supplemental because we don't have any purchases that we're planning to make or whatever.
Right, we do all of our technology purchases either out of, there's a line in supplemental general, the LOB for technology, or we do it out of capital outlay, one of those two.
So if we were to look at the unencumbered balances that the district has, you said that all of the ones after 1 and 2 are transfers out of, with the exception of contingency and counted
Capital outlay,
interest,
right.
are
So-
transfers out of 1 and 2. But those transfers have already occurred.
No.
So,
Yes.
is that right?
Some of it has,
Yeah, some of it has.
but not all of it.
Okay.
Because we transfer based on when we receive tax revenues from the county and also as they're expended. So, for example, we receive a large check in January. And at that point in time, we look at the balances in the general fund and the local option budget. And without completely depleting those two funds, we transfer monies into the other areas like at-risk, vocational education, special education, to get rid of the negative balances that would be showing at that point in time, or as much of those negative balances as we can, based on what we've received in tax revenue.
And I did misspeak. There are two on here also that are part of our budget, but they don't go through our general fund. That's the last two. Those also are flow through, but they're a component of our total budget. They just don't go through our general fund or our local option budget. So when we receive those funds, we then pass those on through up to whatever their budget was. We're only allowed to send them as much as they had budgeted. And you'll notice that for both of those, in an ideal situation, we would send them everything. But the way that the software package works and where all the mill rates and stuff work, at some point they got a little bit ahead. And there's no way that we can make their budget amount big enough to send it all to them. So what we do is, and this goes back to what Julianne was saying, we don't get all the money at once. We'll get some of it in January, we'll get some of it in June, we get some for them maybe in
We get a payment in October,
October, that's the other one.
and then one in January, one in March, and one in June.
And so what we will do is, for example, as soon as we get into the new budget year, sometime after July 1st, they then have new budget authority, and so we'll send them the money, whatever we can. But unless they do something different with their budget, we're probably always going to have an amount there that is more than we can send them. So we can't send them more than what their budget is. So.
And the expenditures category represents what the budgeted authority is? No,
that's just
right.
what we've spent.
It's just what we've flowed through to the rec commission.
And if we wanted to know what the total unencumbered balances for the district are, we wouldn't necessarily add that whole category, because would that be double counting? Or that entire last column, would that be double counting or not?
No, that would be accurate.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing duplicated there, but you're going to be counting some things like you wouldn't want to count capital outlay in that, because it doesn't. I mean, it's there, yes, but it's not part of the operating and the rec commission and things like that. But yeah, if you total them.
Thank you for this.